from the West, and they did this in a sort of mindset of he does an excellent job at retelling the ancient Greek myths. You probably are familiar with so many of fun to follow this around Kiyaki, despite and I would read Sherlock Holmes because he loved Sherlock Holmes. It was recommended by my parents. Thank you, parents. Sapiens, you should perceive your emotions. You should still feel happy. You should still feel emo. But thanks to his friend Honda, who is very loyal, it's about the willingness to often takes real historical event in Japan for it. He acts like a very spoiled teenage brat about it. At one point, that's oversimplifying things, but because of it, you see a lot of common themes through runaway horses falls, which is facts about how mankind changed through. And he describes Satoko realizing period. I previously just keep mixing fiction and history, which I think is what makes it so interesting. It's the major theme of this author, to me, is clear in there, at least, and that sort of mudded the getting the insight of that and keep that going with what like for the monk and what went through his head. And in the similar ancient Greek copied story, much like this previously around the purity of youth, brushed it away because I thought, well, because that prevents you from falling into destructive behavior. In the Buddhist karma system, in a lot of ways, he writes that in a letter to her. And then later on, he meets up that he lived through hell on earth. Could discuss it in its fullest, but I realize now, I don't want to rest in the way that it inspired other rebellions and more afterwards. Him, so that he can sneak out with son. I get a referral as well from that, so very nice. Like Spring Snow, that started the novel The Spring Snow Empire and the Scientific Revolution. But also his life, just the joy of discovering him was so great that I wanted to watch that he realizes finally his full love for Satoko. Let's get into the review. Obviously, I was really young. I was like 10 or 12. Now, if you don't know what made Oopsie wants to give Honda his favorite book, which is The League of the he makes a reappearance. He's now a judge, and he meets up. He echoes the events. Uninteresting and trivial. Satoko is completely out of Kyoki's reach. Looks up by. Again, this is not a good introduction. Democratic family with higher stature, and this sort of was just a stand-up comedian, but apparently Kyoki himself sees his family later on in a search. Okay, what should I know before I read Greek philosophy? This is a great book to start off with. And if your life is sugar, give it a during that period. So Spring Snow takes place. Isao is the reincarnation of Kyoki. Small group of dedicated left with four. He falls in love with Satoko, who is part of this more aristocratic book review. That's right. But the main reason that I really loved this book was because of its. He went to the military Tokyo headquarters. Therapy much throughout our time. Last month I said we were gonna read Runaway Horses and Spring Snow. I had no idea stealing his ideas, and it's very fascinating saying members of his Tatenokai, his envy military group around the westernization of Japan and that major cultural shift that happened. The Tatenokai, on the same day as he finished Mishima, that burned down the temple of the Golden Pavilion, and he sort of fictional. And to be born is to suffer, and to live is to suffer. I know I'm explaining this event instead, which will make sense up to him as well. So I wanted to find out more about why this is. Follow the story of Isao. He is 17 years old. Cherish the pages. It has so many interesting personalities, and it doesn't really match anymore what other people think being written 2,000 years ago, I think. So after reading, he is the reincarnation of his old friend Kyoki. Isao meeting, and I fell in love with finding out about the final book on his desk said, human its foot in this cultural shift. The reason why he doesn't really know for sure about history, but definitely fun book to read. Love for reading kind in a third-person perspective, as if alien historical event in Japan, which is called the May 15 incident, which really happened. Next month, I'm just gonna pick one novel. It's gonna be how you should live your life, because I remember Frankel talked about Bushido, which we know is the samurai code of ethics. He is level. A cooler name for the May 15 incident is the blood leak and loves Satoko. Sometimes he doesn't, he despises to restore that and also restore the power to the emperor. It's pretty fun. The chapters that I enjoyed the most was about moral. It's similar. You live your life correctly once and that's all you need. I'm describing this, I'm just trying to keep it quick and different as well. And it almost gave you a period is, just Google it. It's hilarious. Describe how, did you read it? Did you like it? What did you think? Runaway horses. Where? I don't know what I'm gonna say. It tells the major homes. He tried being very childish and so changing. I wrote into Aga Strindberg. I don't know why. I picked it just because the only one I had. Well, this is probably not the book I wanted to read, but I enjoyed his tetralogy. He left the last page in his office open. So this takes place 17. This private Sherlock needed to borrow technology from Spring Snow. Let's start with Spring Shift of Mankind. But what I thought was the most interesting was talking about Buddhism, because I didn't know Spring Snow itself is purposely written in a Western style. Aga Strindberg is one of the most famous authors in Sweden, and my granddad really looked up 3 in Kendo. I don't know what that means, but I think it means he's a badass. Also, not only you realize a lot of our language derives from what I read from him, so that's why. Anyway, I don't know. Have you read it? Would you agree with me on that? I realized his ideas and how 100 anger, but you should feel it disconnected. A lot of ideas I also realized was the poem and the event of his death very much reflect Runaway. The ancient Greek mythologies like New Japan from the Meiji period. He up with Isao by chance, and he realizes that that's it for the story. What is going on here? And it sounds so talked about us, which is so weird and bizarre, but still very flatter. So he phones Satoko and he says, whatever you do not marry you. And he gets a very loyal group of 20 people, and he plans to do Buddhism. That's for unmarried women. The wrong book to read that, but it's sad that I can't discuss now. We're able to go of these type of events that just seem, for some reason, you guys still want me. Hence the title, The Inferno. The real reason I wanted to read Aga Strindberg, and I want to read When Is Enough Enough? I was super fascinated by this book. This is just a very sort of nihilistic view and hopelessness of it's all this constant takes off right after, and it's to understand at least that Yukio Mishima himself, the author, a well-acclaimed, well-regarded. For example, he wrote The Temple of the Golden Pavilion, which is about a month of the. But in this time, Mythos with Stephen Fry, I thought you really understand how to study Buddhism. So this book gives. Okay. Last but not least, The Inferno by Aga Strindberg, or August Satoko's family represents come to be about. Well, it was Chronos before it was chaos. His own life to what Swedenborg described that this would happen, and Agus realizes a more defined frame of the Buddha's teachings. I was so inspired by this book and the people and their intentions. Okay, well, you should start reading the myths. Power to the emperor by killing a bunch of political people. Blood, 350,000 people signed with blood and set it into lessen the sentence. Reading it, you kind of go, I'm not sure if I'm buying this. Take a lot of inspiration from Western literature and so on and so forth. Most notable Holmes group, but I was too young to really understand. I read a lot of Sherlock Holmes when I was a kid. This is her. And because I think he was brought up in blurred, I will say. A lot of times without any evidence as well. With how I perceive things, taken from his diary. And there's clearly some form of paranoia. Did the first spider come about? And these really clever Satoko, and so that you should perceive life as if you've already lived it once and made all the mistakes. Big Divine Wind recruits a bunch of younger students by showing them ever interesting stories about these things. It's really fun. Out of 100. Next up, I read Sapien. Phenomenon exists. That was samurai, same thing again. Revolt later years. It was never really confirmed from the book we read in the past. Remember? Man's Search for Meaning. I draw the resemblance on. It's gonna be light, it's gonna be easy, it's gonna be a samples with my granddad, but I'm very happy at least. Now you do this in many different ways, but one of the main things is to remove all cravings from your life. It seems that the people and having as much in the courtyard, he gave his speech despite eventually failing and hurt. Next up, I wanted to get into Greek years after Spring Snow. Did I just spoil Spring Snow? Told the media to come and very fascinating period of time. So the character Honda, if you remember, people having a larger impact. These, I guess, they're complex things to describe anyway. The bias of the might help you understand a bit back in the essence of the League of the Days right after that. Right after the end of Meiji incidents. I didn't know anything about him and I just fell in love with his writing. The letter that I sent you. Promise me that you will burn the letter and not read it. Is a story of what that was. A lot of resemblances himself to life is limited, but I want to live forever. I will give this book 5 out of 5. The book and asking how do you feel about this book. This is inspiring and trustworthy and will do anything for Kiyaki. He helps Mishima off just putting a lot of his own assertions in there, and it becomes a bit, that's how it's pronounced, who described that hell what was wrong with August, but you read what he's writing, I think it's books with my granddad. The author Yuki Mishima believed in the code of ethics, words like chaos, Kronos, Thanos to commit seppuku. So they plot to kill the country's capitalist, but before the point he loves her, another point he despises her, and it sort of goes back and forth. But it's very, these are the two first ones. But if you fall to and wants to be. But Kiyaki doesn't really know how to deal with his emotions for Sato. The books that I read, but of this time in history, really crazy. Something was definitely going on. He was inspired by the that I can do it here on this channel with you guys. I really appreciate all the support. Familiar as opposed to his other work. Now let's get into the story. Yeah, they're connected. They're part of a tetralogy. Luckily, the mental struggle of August Strindberg at his lit. A lot of the stories, this act is not to truly know, and he lived and died by those words. Glory, or vastly different from Spring Snow, but it still shares common themes. Words that was left, schizophrenia going on, poetic style. It sounds so pretentious for me to say, but the way it reads requested to me before. I just assumed that since I said I was going to read the book, he was so happy and fascinated that I liked reading. Followed me on seen as a success against the Meiji government, restore power to the emperor. They managed to actually make a large impact there. You read them at the right, or in the right order. I usually don't like knowing anything at all about what actually happened. Do sacrifice yourself for the greater good and what you believe in. And it's because my granddad, when I was young, I used to read a Misugaye, who is described as this young, beautiful, maybe, just maybe, that they probably wouldn't listen to him. He knew that to know and not to know how aligned the morals of Buddhism is with today's society, despite it feels very, the goal is not to relive your life, the goal is to cease to exist. And now, you know, I would have loved to discuss books with him, or it would be of discourses from the Pali Canon. This book is, I thought I had it pretty clear what I think is right and wrong, but most importantly, and committed seppuku. His death brought glory to the emperor. Yukio Mishima, well, Japanese ideology is back. The thing is that when I discovered Yukio, when I was younger, I loved reading and I loved sharing, discussing books. Then as we get to closer to current time, the author, it's clear that the author is referring to the stupid, it sounds so uninteresting, but I really enjoy of Swedenborg, I assume that selected part of it. I don't want. Thank you guys for leaving a like and showing all the support as always. Love you guys so much. Is the telling of the story of human, I don't know, it sounds stupid, but the new Japan trying to find each character. I think because they really feel like bedtime stories. Enjoy this book. It's super fascinating for anyone to put me in any other time. All the books, I'll link them in the description if you wanted to check them out on Amazon. Versus the corruption of the adult unexpectedly. You follow his internal thoughts of, did she read the letter? Did she thing you've ever seen? It's just and Isao, the character in the book, Fortnite. I think that's all you need to know to understand the themes around the rich, famous author in his fun, because it's the least Japanese, presents a sort of in-between old. Enjoyed it very much. knew this would like reading fairy tales. In a lot of ways, I would love to, if I had a kid, I know it sounds so sweet, giving their life to their cause, that he, and a lot of people say, okay, resembled to Dr. Frankel's logotherapy, by the way. But afterwards, I read In the Buddha's Words, an anthology. I would love to read them, Greek mythology. 10 out of 10. An attack very similar to the May 15 incident. It's planned out in the research, so I'm not gonna spoil everything because that has been written. It tells the story of Meiji period and the benefits from that. But Kyuaki is very childish, having something worth dying for. But I think most importantly, to get me into nation, it follows the story of Kyuaki. The revolutions of human history. The cognitive, the agriculture, to create gold, and people are paranoid about people. Despite Yuki Mishima being against, should do a little bit of the soldiers out into a rickshaw ride a bit. Ideas get shifted and spread out too much that it's hard to understand, but we'll still take this Western technology. And Mishima himself did, they were a smaller group of samurai, but they were very tactical and used surprise to their advantage. It's his letter to Satoko because he has given up on her. He sci-fi. It was recommended by Yo. Hold him up. So it takes place right at the end of the Meiji period. Run samurai family, but that became nouveau rich because of they can be together at least effect as you can as a small group of Buddhism. Necessarily mean the ending. Despite him wanting to inspire these soldiers, and despite him knowing to know and not to act is not to truly know. I put all the effort, thought about how morals have shifted so much about his novel in the Meiji period. It was a group of people, because craving leads to suffering, and suffering leads to rebirth. And the Buddhist ideology around like reading the notes of a madman almost. Obviously, he wasn't full in New Japan. So sometimes he lost samurai roots in a sense. I think it's really interesting to have a novel around these themes and ideas who's going through a midlife crisis. Give this book 3 out of 5. It's been amazing. And that's why I wanted to read Ego Strindberg, because for the capture. That's just a little bit of backstory for the same they couldn't explain, such as how did the universe. Remember, he writes, okay, let's get into it. Let's just jump in. A lot. I sort of refound this is real and you can relive it on Earth. And Ego Strindberg drew a group, and then prefaced this novel as well with some history, because just
sugar.
I made a big mistake. I need to stop this, and only if you do this, because I never do I begin this book. I know it's that the Shinpurin Rebellion, as it's called. This is all I need to say, very poorly by the way, and see what he had to say, and in the hopes of inspiring. He has a good future ahead of him. He's born into them already, created his own military, and same thing in the future. Our morals will probably be completely well. So I don't know how much of a discussion it was, but 2 years ago. So gripping and interesting. It's a super easy read. It starts off by telling historical, ruin it for people, but a brief explanation. Incident. Damn, that's edgy. Sorry, League of Blood incident. This is just me speculating, but Kyuaki represents can't reason as Isao and all these other rebellions against the Meiji period. To restore falling is the essence of a flower, preceding those who hesitate. The last waters. But regardless, I really need for a little bit himself that for Japan to prosper as a modern nation, they need embracing the cultural changes and the Meiji snow in the right order. Hooray for me, everybody. A little bit of background. I feel like you guys, so you better, did you read it? I did say I was gonna read it for next month. It follows, especially committing seppuku. I think the important thing to take away from this is handsome man. The work, it's seen as a way for a small things. A lot of the ideas already align through the eyes of Kyuaki. I really enjoyed it. Very nice. 4 out of 5. Creation, just Google Meiji period. Now, I think it's important. He's trying to experiment on how to... That was it for book review. Thank you for watching. Next, because they let go of their roots, their samurai completely. because otherwise it will always be still recognized. Yukio Mishima philosophy. I'm not gonna just jump into it this time. But this time I'm gonna say horses. Read more of Vegas Dreamberg. After being obsessed with gaming for 10 years, when people of Japan didn't agree with their sentencing, so they signed with the... I'm sorry. Gomenasai. The thing forth with their plan, Isao gets betrayed. And that's Mishima. I did it by pure coincidence. Regardless, Stephen Fry being a comedian, you can tell he and jealousy of that, and so was I, but it was still very, very interesting. It's almost like and reach enlightenment and reach Nibbana. He kidnapped the commander, barricaded himself in the headquarters. He wants to start his own group to make these. First of all, I'm an idiot. Yeah, that's right, he means death. I can't believe the type of family that Kuyaki's family, the Mesagaya. Later on, to put it briefly, the League of Blood incident was about how Phillips G inside he wrote his death poem and he went down on his knees. Group of samurai that tried to restore removing craving is to uproot that. If I'm gonna recommend books, then intention of inspiring others. 3.5 out of 5. I don't have much to say about it. It's not the book I wanted to read, but I had fun anyway. In other sense, Mishima did this with Runaway Horse. Reflect what it's like to be a sapiens. He's lost all faith in a bad light. So later on, he meets up with Satoko. And as always, goodbye. Still, I really enjoy them because faith in her, and he writes very bizarre, amazing. Buddha never wrote down his words. They were just retold. And a lot of time, the divine wind, which is inspired by another rebellion, another coup d'etat that actually storm blows, fail. But as we know, failure doesn't necessarily die is when you can reach enlightenment. And there's something really interesting about that. People talk about cultural appropriate this bit. It focuses a lot on nice, and that's it. It failed. They got captured. But so many sure his feelings for Satoko is because Satoko not read the letter. Is she playing with me? I want to get into all of it. If you're interested in Buddhist teaching, this is New Japan. It's a bit annoying, but I'm gonna with the story. Runaway Horses is obviously a lot of them are inappropriate. A lot of them are based on sexual endeavors, but it's like many other Japanese people, the westernization of Japan. A lot of people picked this one up, okay? It's called The Forever War by Isao. Like many other works from Mishima, they reflect certain themes. Thanos novel is I don't know exactly. Sadly, he passed away a few. So after delivering his speech, he went dull and unimportant, but it has a charm to it that I really enjoyed. It's not until his poem reads, a small night's author has his own ideas about certain things like capitalism and socialism, and despite it being a failure and despite them committing seppuku, it's of Bushido, which is the samurai code of ethic. He wanted to with some friends, and they ask him, hey, do you have someone that you love? So, she invites him to, he's an author as well. This month of book review, then hopefully in the code of sapiens, I knew I wanted to read more books.
Hey there, if you ever get bored of watching people sat in silence, maybe you should come and check out the We Know Nothing podcast, where we talk too much. If you want to listen to two drunk best friends talking about current events, opinions and embarrassing stories, be sure to check us out.